Going live to talk about the difference between pre-launch marketing content and regular marketing content. And this is a question I get sometime, and it's such a really great question. Is like, what's the difference between the content or the marketing that I'm always doing versus what I am putting out during a pre-launch? If you're with me right now on Instagram, hello. If you're on Facebook, I'm going live in both places. And I'm really excited to talk about this because I had this question over the last week, and it's something I hear a lot. It's like, you may be like, wait, I'm doing my marketing. I have really great marketing, right? Like our stuff is on point. And what is the difference? And I like to break it into three different categories, if you will. So there are three categories when it comes to our marketing. That first is what I consider your regular marketing content. The second part is the consideration stage. The next part is your actual launch. So with most of my clients, we're going through and we're rolling through these launch periods where we have a time where we are in what I call regular marketing, a point where we go into pre-launch or this consideration stage, and then the point where we go into the actual launch and we roll through these. I like it this way because what ends up happening sometimes, if you are a service provider, let's say you're selling an evergreen product, something that's available all the time. And this process also can be done for these things. But what happens is we end up trying to sell again and again, right? Like we don't know the difference between when should we be selling? When should I be just talking about creating lead gen? When should I be marketing? So I love these rolling periods because it helps define a promotional calendar. The other thing I like about it, and it was funny, I was just talking to a person on a sales call today who was considering a membership. One of the things I like about the process that I'm talking about here is that you have times where you have a heightened visibility, heightened sales period, a point where you're all in, and a point you can kind of let off the engines a little bit. The cool thing that happens about this time, and this is also what we're going to be going into, is when you start creating these cyclical things that happen, you start to have these natural times where you can really pump up anticipation, really get people excited. Really then, because you have created a period of anticipation, excitement, where people know you're going into a sales period. During this sales period, you can actually sell and sell with conviction, because it's a certain amount of time, and then we go back into our regular marketing content. So let's talk about the differences between the three. So if you're like, okay, how does this work? Well, first of all, regular marketing content is, in my mind, regular marketing content is where you're building a lot of know, like, trust, first of all. Not that you, and that's the other thing here. It's not that pre-launch content could never be regular marketing content, and it's never that regular marketing content can't be pre-launch content. So keep this in mind. So to me, regular marketing content is, you can be a little bit more loosey-goosey. You can experiment. You can try new things. You can test out new messaging. This is a time where you can build know, like, and trust, right? Where you're not as worried about sales. You are more worried and about creating this really tight strategy, as much as you are trying to think, okay, what kind of content can I be getting in front of people? How can I stay top of mind? How can I create maybe more engagement? And we're going to talk about that in a moment. With regular marketing content, maybe I am going through and doing a bit more education. When you go into pre-launch, I recommend you do little to no educational content. We can talk about why in a moment. So maybe you're doing a little bit more education. Educational content, in my opinion, is for usually people that are a little bit lower in the awareness journey, right? Educational content helps build a little bit more know, like, and trust. I love, for me personally, I have frameworks that I use in my business. I love talking about my frameworks, right? Going a little bit deeper, discussing different things that are going on, right? This is a time, regular marketing is staying top of mind, building know, like, and trust, getting people, really building up your leads, spending time on lead generation, getting people in lead magnet, right? All of these things are happening with our regular marketing content. Now, what I like is, and this starts to be the difference, is when you go into a period, sorry, I'm trying to figure out like how to like look good on both Instagram and Facebook, and it's not easy. So the thing here, and I want you to keep in mind, is the kind of the difference as you move into a pre-launch is that you're moving into a period in your marketing and sales cycle where you are being very intentional. You're being very intentional about the people who are currently in your audience, and you are moving them from point A to point B in terms of their thought process, in terms of the beliefs that they have, in terms of objections that they have, in terms of the objections, and this isn't objections to your offer, this is objections to your methodology. So let me give you an example here. Let's say, I'll just use myself because it's easy. You know, one of the big objections I get around pre-launch is that, or it's kind of a myth objection, is that people think, oh, if I'm going to be doing pre-launch content, it's actually going to be more work, right? Where in actuality, pre-launch content is what sells your program down the line. You're already creating content. It doesn't create more work when you know how to create a strategic plan very easily, right? There's all these things that I could argue. So when you're in what I call the consideration stage, the type of marketing content that you're putting out is building anticipation. It is creating buzz and momentum. It is letting people know that you know exactly that that you empathize exactly where they are at in their struggle around the offer that you create. It's dealing with objections and helping, you know, this is a time for belief shifting, meaning helping people see and have a different perspective on what the methods that you sell. This is also a time where you are being very intentional. You're being very strategic. You are not as experimenting. Of course, marketing is always a bit of an experiment, but you're not doing heavy experimental time, right? You know what needs to be said to your people. You are getting the word out there. Hopefully, I just did something funky on my Facebook. Oh, here we go. So in general, I got really dark on my Zoom, so hopefully it's okay. I'm going to hold my phone. So this is a time where it's really going through, and what often is forgotten here is that people, and this is where consideration content, pre-launch content, anticipation marketing comes into play, is that people need time to make a decision. If you look at the population, and this is according to DISC, about half of people are slow decision makers, half of people are fast decision makers. This is a time where you are giving the slow decision makers the consideration time, a time where they can think about things. There is a lot of autonomy built into this process. We're also giving people a heads up during consideration content. When I say heads up, it's literally, hey, I'm opening the doors September 26th to the next round of the pre-launch plan program. By the way, I am. If this is something that you're interested in, like just a heads up, right? It's this no pressure mentions and asides that prep people for what you're doing. The other thing that needs to be done during this consideration time is figuring out creative ways to talk about the results you've gotten for people. And I love to do these in like story-based case studies. So yes, you could do this during your regular marketing content too, but this is a time that I really recommend that you lean into case studies, talking about the stories of your clients we won't even go into that. You're going in and really talking about the stories of the things that are happening with your clients, your customers, what is going on. The other thing that happens with consideration content is these posts, and I mentioned this in my Facebook group yesterday. They are called silent seller posts. When you understand the difference between these three marketing phases, which by the way, I don't think I've ever heard anyone talk about, but when you understand the difference between these three stages. Consideration content also is a time for pre-selling. There's also a time for what I call silent seller post. My friend Emily Reagan and I co-named this recently in a discussion we were having. Silent seller posts are posts where I am not concerned as much with engagement as I am concerned with getting the message in front of my people that I want them to hear or see. I'm going to give you a couple of examples how this, because a lot of times what happens, and obviously, especially on social media, we are playing a bit of an algorithm game, which is why I think you need an email list and that's where you need to sell, but that's a whole different discussion. But really going into like, when you understand these silent seller type posts, you are less worried about vanity metrics and more worried about what your people are seeing and your audience is seeing. So, and I'm also not as concerned with the outcome. So let me give you a couple of examples. Last week in my Facebook group and even on my Instagram stories, last week, my clients just had an amazing week. Like I had like one person that sold pre-sold 5 spots, someone who was in the pre-launch plan program. I had another person who took the pre-launch plan program a while back. She had pre-sold 4 spots inside of her program. I had another person, I think she sold 4 or 5 spots in her membership as a pre-sale when she was doing the stuff that I'm talking about here during consideration content. I have another private client who got a book deal, is in talks with an agent with a pretty well-known publisher, right? Like these people had amazing wins. And so I put it into my Facebook group. I knew that Facebook post was absolutely not going to get a bazillion comments, right? I wasn't worried about comments. So sometimes we're like worried about these, like, oh, did I get comments, shares, likes, saves? That wasn't my intention. My intention is to show that the people that are working with me are getting true results in sales. Once I understand that, I have this, I don't have an attachment to the outcome as much as what I'm getting in front of. Well, I do, it is an outcome, but I'm not as worried about some of the vanity metrics. When I start understanding that this happens, now there's a beautiful mix that I like to see in consideration content, which I'm going to talk more about this. This is the pace, personality, authority, credibility, empathy. We're going to talk about this probably next week. I want to discuss like how you can structure your pre-launch content, and then I want to discuss like the nitty-gritty of it. So over the next 2 weeks. So make sure that you are following me on my email list so you can stay. But what happens here is like, I want to give you an example. So that was one example of a silent seller type post, right? I'm intentionally doing that leading up to the launch of my program. The second thing that a silent seller type post is where I am kind of showing like some of my authority in the industry. And I was thinking about how this makes me feel weird to even say out loud. But I am going to be on a panel for Copy Chief at Copy Chief Live at the first week of October. By the way, if you haven't gotten your ticket and you want to come, let me know. I would love to see you there. But I'm going to be on a panel, right? My name is on this flyer. Well, I decided I did have the opportunity to be able to sell tickets on an affiliate basis. I knew though, and I put that into my email, I knew that the chances, unless I'm doing a campaign, my audience, is not full of copywriters, it's full of business owners. Yes, there may be someone that wants to take me up on it, but the intention behind me adding that information about Copy Chief is because I want people to know that, once again, I feel weird saying it, but this is the other thing. During consideration content, you have to be able to humble brag and tell people why they should hire you. There is a huge world out there that is not afraid to shout themselves out, and you can't be either. I'm going to wrap this up really quickly. But the other thing here is, so I put it in there because I wanted the flyer to go out where my name was next to people like Laura Belgray, Chris Warzikowski, Justin Blackman, Daniel Threshold, right? Like this is a cool event that I get to be a part of. So, but my intentions were different. Even if I would have made a sale on a ticket, that would have been a nice to have, but that was not my intention. This is how you can start to create content where you're not so wrapped up in, are people responding all the time? And by the way, we have plenty of things that happen during consideration where people respond, but I also understand the difference between every type of content that I'm putting out there, whether it's to build anticipation, whether it's to build authority, whether it's to build credibility, whether for people to, figure out that I have the solution to the offer that they, the solution to the problem they have. This is a very intentional time period where we are setting the stage to sell our offers. That is what consideration and pre-launch content is. And it's where anticipation marketing comes in. So I put on my stories today, Louis Vuitton, if you look, they are pre-launching one of their new bags. It's probably a $3,000 bag. They're not waiting to tell you this $3,000 bag is coming out in the fall. They're telling you right now. They actually call it a pre-launch. They let you know. I could go on. I won't even use Taylor Swift as an example because I want to keep this tight. So when you get into launch content, right? Consideration is where you're giving people an opportunity to choose yes or no, where you're building up all these things that I talked about. Once you get into launch content is where you are having people choose yes or no. That's it, right? You get into launch content, you are asking them to make a decision. Yes, you're dealing with objections. Yes, you are doing these other things, but everything is in terms of your offer. So often what people that are selling courses, programs, high-end mastermind coaches, they are waiting to the launch period to do all of the work that should be done during consideration time. And then they're burned out, tired. They're wondering why people aren't buying like they want. It's because they've skipped this very important part of the marketing cycle and the buyer cycle. Okay, that's it for me. I'm going to run. If you have questions, if you watch this later, I would love if you hashtag replay. Let me know what you think. Let me know what questions you have. If there's holes in your mind where you're like, okay, this makes sense, but I'm not quite understanding. Oh, last thing I said, someone last week on my other live said that how can I create anticipation during this like pre-launch consideration time that is not inflated hype? Very, very quickly. The way I would worry more that you're not creating enough anticipation, that you don't have enough hype around your offer. You need to be your own company's hype person. Most people aren't. Most people are afraid to be that. And I can go into more why. It's funny as I talk, I'm like, oh yeah, I thought, another thought I have. But the real thing here that I want to just make abundantly clear is that the consideration part is it's when you are able to understand your clients so clearly and how you help them, when you've gotten amazing customer results, when you are able to do these things, you're not worried about inflated hype. You know the results that you get people, you know the process, your methodology, your framework works. You have the customer information and results to back it up. You know that you are going to work harder than most people to make sure your person gets results. When you can start, when you shift your thinking to that, it is not about it creating inflated hype. It's about figuring out, I do need to hype up my thing and get people excited, because when I can get people excited about the transformation, and that's really what it comes down to. All of us here, whether it's a program, a service, a mastermind, we're in the business of helping change people's trajectories, solving their problems. When you can like feel that there, and when you're messaging, when you understand your messaging so clearly and your ideal client so clearly, it doesn't become about inflated hype. It becomes about how excited you are to help someone and that you're not afraid to spread the word and get it out there. Okay, that's all I'm going to say. Thank you so much for being with me.